The first time Commander Elias Vorn saw the cat pilot, she was asleep in his captain's chair, curled into the contoured cradle as if it had been designed for her lean, furred frame. Lieutenant Sarah Keth of the Falari Coalition had her boots kicked off and her tail draped over the armrest. Her triangular ears twitched at the hum of the ship's reactors. One golden eye cracked open as he entered the bridge. "You're in my seat," Vorn said evenly. Sarah blinked, then stretched languidly, claws extending and retracting with a soft metallic click against the composite armrest. "I'm in the pilot's chair," she corrected. "You just like to pretend it's yours." A low chuckle rumbled from the rear of the bridge. Tracker Hroth stood near the tactical station, towering over the consoles. He was Varg, genetically uplifted wolf-descended hunters from the outer systems. Thick gray fur rippled across his shoulders, braided with beads that marked completed contracts. His amber eyes studied Vorn with unsettling stillness. "You are late," Hroth observed. "We were beginning to think the human had reconsidered." Vorn glanced around the bridge of the corvette Wayfarer's deck. It was small by Union standards, just enough room for a crew of 8 and the bare minimum of comforts. The rest of his team avoided eye contact. Engineer Taller busied herself with a data slate. The communications officer pretended to recalibrate an antenna array. He understood why. The job was suicide. Beyond the Veil Drift, a region of unstable gravity tides and radiation storms, an automated survey station had gone dark. The station had been studying something vast moving in the drift. Something organic. Something that swallowed drones whole. The Union Senate had written it off as lost. But then a single transmission had bled through static and radiation. Queen sighted. Hive confirmed. Evac failed. Then silence. Officially, the mission was reconnaissance and retrieval of data cores. Unofficially, it was to confirm the presence of a Hive-class xenoform capable of stripping colonies bare. And Vorn had handpicked the 2 crew members most other captains avoided, the cat pilot and the tracker wolf. "They told me," Vorn said quietly, stepping down to the central platform, "that I was wasting my first command." Sarah hopped out of the chair with effortless grace and perched on the edge of the console. "They tell humans that often. They said you were unreliable." He looked at her directly. She grinned, sharp teeth flashing. "Because I nap between maneuvers?" "They said," Vorn continued, turning to Hroth, "that the Varg are too bound to instinct. That you'd chase shadows into an airlock if they smelled interesting enough." Hroth's ears flicked back slightly, but his posture remained proud. "Instinct is simply experience older than language." "They wrote you off," Vorn said. "Both of you." Silence settled over the bridge, broken only by the distant thrum of engines. "And?" Sarah asked softly. "And I didn't." The Veil Drift was a graveyard of broken asteroids and ion storms. Lightning crawled across clouds of dust the size of moons. The Wayfarer's deck shuddered as Sarah threaded it through a gap that no simulation would have dared calculate. Her fingers danced across the controls. Her tail flicked in tight arcs, counterbalancing every movement. "You see," she murmured, "space is a river. It flows if you listen." Outside, a gravity surge bent starlight into spirals. Vorn gripped the railing behind her. "You're enjoying this." Her ears flattened in mock offense. "Commander, I was born enjoying this." Hroth stood behind the sensor array, nose close to the intake vents. He inhaled slowly, eyes half-lidded. "There," he said. Taller frowned. "There what?" "I see nothing but charged particles and debris." Hroth's claws tapped the console. Metal. Burned polymer. Old blood. Sarah's gaze sharpened. "You can smell that through vacuum?" Hroth bared his teeth faintly. "No." But the station vented atmosphere before it died. The molecules cling to the debris. Taller shook her head. That's impossible. Vorn met Hrotha's eyes. Coordinates. Moments later, the broken silhouette of Survey Station Helios 9 drifted into view. It was half-eaten. Massive sections had been torn away as if by colossal mandibles. Hull plating curled outward like petals. The docking ring was sheared clean off. Syrah's playful expression vanished. That's not meteor damage. No, Vorn agreed. A faint pulse echoed from within the station. Weak power, intermittent. Life signs, he asked. Taller scanned. Negative. But there's biological residue everywhere. It's layered, like resin. Hive, Hroth murmured. Syrah swallowed. We're not boarding that. We are, Vorn said. Her golden eyes snapped to him. Commander, we need the data cores. If there's a queen in the drift, colonies are at risk. Hrotha's tail swayed slowly. I will go first. Vorn shook his head. We go together. Inside Helios 9, gravity flickered between 0 and half standard. Resin coated the walls in ribbed, organic arches. The air was thin but breathable, barely. Syrah moved with eerie silence, magnetic boots disengaged, gliding from wall to wall. Her pupils were wide, drinking in the dim light. Hrotha's nose twitched constantly. He paused at intersections, head tilted. They nested here, he whispered. Workers. Soldiers. Where are they now? Taller's voice crackled over comms from the ship. Hrotha's hackles rose. Listening. A distant skitter echoed through the corridor. Syrah's claws slid free with a metallic whisper. Contact. The first drone lunged from a ceiling vent, a chitinous mass of limbs and serrated mandibles. Syrah twisted midair, firing a pulse shot that blew a smoking crater through its thorax. Acidic fluid splashed the wall, hissing. 2 more followed. Hroth met them head-on. He didn't fire immediately. He moved, fast and brutal. His powered gauntlet crushed a drone's skull. He pivoted, jaws clamping onto a limb and tearing it free before finishing the creature with a close-range blast. Vorn covered their flanks, pulse rifle steady. When the corridor fell silent again, Syrah exhaled shakily. They're fast. They are scouts, Hroth said. The hive tests us. Vorn glanced at the resin-coated walls. Then let's not fail the test. They found the command center buried under layers of hardened secretion. Data cores blinked faintly behind a cracked console. Taller guided them remotely. Slot the portable drive into the primary interface. I'll siphon everything. Syrah worked quickly, tail lashing with tension. Hroth froze. Commander, he said softly. Vorn turned. What? Hrotha's ears were pinned flat. His eyes were wide, not with fear, but with focus. She is near. A vibration thrummed through the deck. Deep. Massive. The walls seemed to pulse. Syrah's voice dropped to a whisper. That's not a drone. No, Hroth agreed. It is the mother. The corridor behind them split open as something colossal forced its way through bulkheads like paper. The queen emerged in pieces, first the crown of armored plates, then a cluster of eyes that reflected their lights in sickly rainbows. Her body filled the corridor, bloated and ridged, trailing ovipositor sacs that scraped the ceiling. She was easily 30 meters long. Taller's voice broke over comms. That's impossible. Disconnect, Vorn ordered. Now. Syrah yanked the drive free as the queen shrieked, a sound that rattled teeth and vibrated bones. Drones flooded the passage behind her. We can't outrun that in these corridors, Syrah hissed. Hrotha's gaze flicked upward. We do not. He pointed to a maintenance shaft barely large enough for a human. Syrah grinned despite herself. You're kidding. Vorn didn't hesitate. Move. They scrambled into the shaft as the Queen's mandibles snapped inches from Vorn's boots. The shaft angled upward toward the station's reactor core. Bad idea, Taller warned. The core is unstable. Vorn's mind raced. How unstable? Critical if breached. Hrotha's eyes gleamed. Fire cleanses hives. Syrah shot Vorn a look. You're not thinking. I am, he said. We can't let that thing leave the drift. They burst into the reactor chamber. The Queen tore through the shaft behind them, roaring. The chamber was vast, spherical, lit by the flicker of a failing star contained within magnetic fields. Vorn turned to Syrah. Can you fly in here? She stared at the chaotic energy arcs. Then she smiled, a fierce, predatory curve. Commander, I was born enjoying this. Draw her around the core. Keep her focused on you. And you, she demanded. He looked at Hroth. We hunt, the wolf said. Syrah leapt onto a maintenance platform and sprinted, firing bursts at the Queen's eyes. The massive creature followed, smashing through scaffolding. Vorn and Hroth moved in tandem, targeting ovipositor sacs along her underside. Explosions of ichor splashed across the chamber. The Queen thrashed, tail slamming into the magnetic field projectors. Careful, Taller shouted. You breached that core, and that's the point, Vorn muttered. Hroth lunged, planting a charge directly onto the largest sac. She is bound to the reactor's heat, he growled. She feeds on it. Syrah vaulted over a collapsing beam, barely avoiding snapping mandibles. Then let's give her a feast, she called. Vorn sprinted to the central control console. Alarm screamed as he overrode safeties. Commander, Taller's voice was raw with panic. Prepare the ship, he said. We have 60 seconds. The reactor's containment field began to fluctuate wildly. The Queen sensed it. She reared back, eyes widening as energy arced across her carapace. Hroth tackled Vorn as a blast of plasma tore through the chamber. Go! Hroth barked. They ran. Syrah covered their retreat, firing until her weapon clicked empty. She tossed it aside and sprinted, tail streaming behind her. The shaft collapsed as the reactor core breached. They dove through the airlock into open space, just as the station erupted in a newborn star of white-blue light. The shockwave hurled them toward the Wayfarer's deck, where Taller had already extended grapples. Inside the ship, Syrah collapsed against the bulkhead, laughing breathlessly. Hroth sat heavily, for singed but eyes bright. Vorn stared at the viewport as Helios, 9 disintegrated into glowing fragments. Silence filled the bridge. Then Taller whispered, "It's gone." Hroth shook his head slowly. No, Vorn looked at him sharply. The Queen is dead, Hroth clarified. But hives scatter when threatened. Some drones will survive. Syrah pushed herself upright. Then we hunt them. Vorn studied his crew, the engineer who doubted, the wolf who trusted instinct over protocol, the cat who danced through gravity like it was a playground. The Union would hear of this. They would dissect reports and debate policy. And they would still write Hay would hunt it. Off pilots who napped and trackers who listened to the wind. Set a course for the outer colonies, Vorn said. Syrah slid back into the pilot's chair, his chair, and flashed him a sideways grin. Yes, Commander. The Wayfarer's deck turned away from the dying glow of Helios, 9. As stars stretched into lines, Hroth stepped beside Vorn. You chose us, the wolf said quietly. Why? Vorn considered the question. Because everyone else saw your differences as flaws, he replied. I saw them as tools. Hroth's tail swayed once. And now? Now, Vorn said, watching Syrah guide the ship with effortless precision. I see them as strengths. Syrah's ears twitched. I can't hear you, you know. I'm counting on it, Vorn said. Beyond the viewport, the veil drift churned, dangerous, unpredictable, alive. But so were they. The Union would send more ships eventually. They would fortify borders and draft new protocols. But the first line of defense would always be the ones others underestimated. The cat pilot who flew like space itself was her playground. The tracker wolf who could scent death through vacuum. And the human who believed in both. As the Wayfarer's debt vanished into hyperspace, a faint echo of the Queen's scream lingered in memory. Not as a warning, but as a promise. They had survived the hive. Next time, tea. The jump to hyperspace should have brought relief. Instead, it brought silence. Not the comforting kind, the heavy kind. The kind that settles into your bones after you've stared into something that shouldn't exist and lived to tell about it. The Wayfarer's debt hummed steadily as it cut through the dark between stars. Systems were stable. Hull integrity was intact, barely. The crew was alive. And yet, no one celebrated. Syrah sat in the pilot's chair, unusually still. Her hands rested lightly on the controls, but she wasn't flying on instinct anymore. She was thinking. That alone told Vorn how deeply the encounter had shaken her. Hroth stood near the forward viewport, arms crossed, gaze distant. His nose twitched occasionally, as if trying to catch a scent that no longer existed. Vorn remained standing behind them both, watching, measuring, learning. Finally, Taller broke the silence over comms. Data's coming through clean. The core dump survived. I'm parsing it now. Find anything? Vorn asked. A pause. Then, yes, and you're not going to like it. Minutes later, the entire bridge dimmed as Taller pushed the recovered data onto the main display. What appeared wasn't just telemetry. It was a timeline, a map of movement. The veil drift lit up in shifting patterns, clusters of signals, spreading like veins through space. Syrah leaned forward, ears flattening. That's not one hive. No, Taller said quietly. It's dozens. Hroth's low growl filled the room. A migration. Vorn's jaw tightened. Or an expansion. The data zoomed in further. Each cluster had a central mass, a queen, and surrounding each queen, thousands of drones. Syrah's voice dropped. We didn't stop it. Vorn didn't answer immediately, because she was right. They hadn't ended the threat. They had only survived it. The next revelation came seconds later. A recording, fragmented, distorted, but intact enough to understand. A scientist's voice, panicked, breathless. They're not just feeding on matter, they're adapting to energy sources. The reactor accelerated growth. The queen, she's learning. Static swallowed the rest. Then another voice. Calmer. Resigned. If this gets out, don't engage them directly. You won't win by force. They evolved too fast. The recording ended. Silence returned. But this time, it felt sharper. More dangerous. Syrah leaned back slowly. So what, Commander? We run? Warn the Union and let them throw fleets at it until they figure it out. They will, Taller said. That's exactly what they'll do. And they'll lose, Hroth added bluntly. Vorn stepped forward, eyes fixed on the map. No, he said quietly. They all looked at him. We won't let them fight it blind. Syrah narrowed her eyes. Meaning, Vorn said. We already know more than any fleet they'll send. Hroth tilted his head. Because we survived the Queen. Because we studied her, Vorn corrected. You tracked her behavior. Syrah, you saw how she moved, how she reacted. Taller, we have their data now. He turned to face them fully. They evolve. That's their strength. And their weakness, Hroth finished. Syrah's ears perked. Because evolution needs time. Vorn nodded. And patterns, Talar added, catching on. If we can predict their adaptations, we can stay ahead of them, Vorn said. For the first time since the explosion, something shifted in the room. Not relief. Purpose. Days passed as they moved along the outer edges of the drift. They didn't return to Union space. Not yet. Instead, they hunted. Not with weapons alone, but with observation. They tracked smaller drone clusters first, isolated them, studied their responses. Syrah flew like something reborn, more focused, more precise. She no longer treated space like a playground. Now, she treated it like a battlefield she intended to master. Hroth became something else entirely. Not just a tracker, a strategist. He began mapping patterns no sensor could detect, movement rhythms, reaction timings, even subtle behavioral shifts between different broods. They are not one mind, he explained one night. Each queen thinks, but they share echoes. Syrah flicked her tail. So they're like a bad habit that spreads. Hroth bared his teeth faintly. Yes. One that learns. Talar built models. Vorn made decisions. And slowly, carefully, they began to win small engagements. Not by overpowering the hive, but by outthinking it. Weeks later, they stood together on the bridge again. Another cluster glowed ahead on the display. Smaller than Helios 9's queen, but growing. Syrah cracked her knuckles. So, what's the plan this time, Commander? Vorn folded his arms. No reactor explosions, he said. A shame, she muttered. Hrotha's eyes gleamed. We test the theory. Talar brought up the simulation overlay. If we overload their energy intake again, but in controlled bursts, we might destabilize their growth cycle. Force them to evolve too fast, Syrah said. And break themselves, Vorn finished. Hroth nodded slowly. A predator that outruns its own body dies. Syrah grinned. Now that was a hunt. As the Wayfarer's dead advanced, something changed in the tension on the bridge. It wasn't fear anymore. It wasn't even survival. It was confidence. Hard-earned. Sharpened by experience. Forged in fire. Just before engagement, Talar hesitated. Commander, she said softly. Yes. She glanced at Syrah, then at Hroth, then back to him. They were wrong about them. Vorn followed her gaze. Syrah was already maneuvering into position, her movements smooth and deliberate. Hroth stood ready, completely still, like a storm waiting to break. Yes, Vorn said. They were. Syrah spoke without looking back. You know, she said, when I got assigned here, I thought this was a dead-end command. Vorn raised an eyebrow. And now? Her tail flicked once. Now I think they sent me exactly where I needed to be. Hroth gave a low, approving rumble. Pack finds purpose, he said. Vorn allowed himself a small smile. Then his voice hardened. All right, he said. Let's show them what they wrote off. The ship surged forward. Stars bent. Weapons armed. The hive stirred. And this time, they were ready. Final lines. Out in the endless dark, where empires fear to look too closely, a small corvette hunted something vast. Not with overwhelming force, but with trust, instinct, precision, and belief. They had been dismissed, ignored, written off. But now, the cat pilot flew the impossible. The tracker wolf saw what others couldn't. And the human led them not because he was the strongest, but because he was the one who believed. And in the war that was coming, that would make all the difference.